Wrestling fans, when we go back to 1994 and we look at SummerSlam, what do we think? We think of a classic rivalry between Bret Hart and Owen Hart for the WWF Championship. We think of The Undertaker versus The Undertaker, in which Million Dollar Man had his Undertaker, and yes, Paul Bear had his Undertaker. Who was the true Undertaker of the WWF? We had the Million Dollar Man having a huge role in SummerSlam. Not only in that matchup, but also the Million Dollar Team took on the Head Shrinkers, and Tatanka taking on Lex Luger. With the storyline they built up, no question one of those two was going to join the Million Dollar Corporation. We'll dive into that as well. Huge role he played in this contest. Diesel versus Razor Ramon for the Intercontinental Championship. All that plus so much more happened on this edition of SummerSlam. First off, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a subscriber and all the love and support you give to this channel each and every time you tune in by liking, sharing, and everything else. And if you're not a subscriber, subscribe and make sure you hit the bell so you can get all notifications every time I upload a video. Now, the 1994 SummerSlam. Million Dollar Man and his corporation kicked off SummerSlam with the Head Shrinkers. Head Shrinkers had Alpha and Captain Lou Albano. And this was supposed to be for the Tag Team Championship. And instead, it wasn't, because this was Diesel's year. 1994 was Diesel's year. Diesel held every championship that you could in the WWF. He held the Tag Team, the Intercontinental, and the WWF Championship all in 1994. And right before SummerSlam, Shawn Michaels and Diesel captured the Tag Team titles, which made this match kind of nothing. It was for nothing. It was kind of like, in the words of Vincent Kennedy McMahon, because he was on commentary along with Jerry the King Lawler, the Head Shrinkers are going to be hot. They're going to be angry. They're going to rip someone's head off. He was being very outlandish, as he was every single time he was on commentary. I mean, if there's one thing he was really good at when it was comes to commentary, he was outlandish, and he always put over the matches. I will give Vinnie Mac that. And he was going to make sure that the matches back then were not going to drown, And Jerry King Lawler did a great job playing the heel part as well. But we'll dive into some more of that going on in this pay-per-view. But this match, it had some substance. It didn't really do anything to get us upbeat for SummerSlam as far as an opening contest. The biggest thing that happened about this is that the Million Dollar Corporation won, and they won by DQ to, in my eyes, protect the Head Shrinkers, because they were on the up and up at this point. And they won by DQ because Bam Bam hit Captain Lou, and Alpha came in and started beating up Bam Bam and IRS, and then they brawled all the way into the back. And then, of course, Howard Finkel, best ring announcer of all time, announced that the Million Dollar Corporation won. Bam Bam Bigelow and Irwin R. Shyster. The second matchup Bull Nakano, along with Luna Vachon. They were going after the women's championship against Alundra Blaze. Could Bull Nakano become the women's champion in the WWF? Now, if there was a match that they probably should have put on first, this would have been first, in my estimation, because this match got people more invested. And if you want to get people invested as far as an opening match, this would be it. WWE, not Bam Bam Bigelow and IRS and the Head Shrinkers. So you put the women's matchup on second, and then they get people excited. And Bull Nakano, no question, looked great in this contest. She was on the up and rising. She did eventually get the women's championship at, I'm not sure what event it is. If you all know, you can put it in the comments below. I know it was in her home country. She didn't capture the title at SummerSlam. Alundra Blaze was victorious, but it was a good contest, and it did get people more invested for what was to come, which was the Intercontinental Championship between Diesel and the bad guy, Chico Razor Ramon. This contest, some people might say, well, it was just to show Diesel's strength. That's it. Yeah, some people might say that. Good point. But as we discussed before, it was Diesel's year in the WWF. Of course it's going to be just to show Diesel's strength. Now, they just won the tag team championship. Do you honestly think they're going to have Diesel retain the IC championship? Of course not. He loses the IC championship to Razor Ramon. It was a good matchup for what they gave, though. Walter Payton was in the corner of Razor Ramon. They were at Chicago at the brand new, beautiful United Center. So it made sense, Walter Payton being with them. And Shawn Michaels gets on top with the IC belt. And that's when the crumbling began, with Walter Payton grabbing the belt, following Shawn Michaels around the ring, and then, the super kick to Diesel's face, which ends up costing him the match. 1, 2, 3. New IC champion, Razor Ramon. Now, the thing to remember about this is that Shawn Michaels and Diesel, even though they had captured the tag team championship not too long before SummerSlam, this really was crumbling. They were starting to crumble. And as we found out at the Survivor Series 1994, they broke up. They were still tag team champions, and they just went downhill and just fell apart because of the same reason. He got kicked, and then it was like the tag team championships went vacant because they split up. And, of course, that led to Diesel becoming WWF champion. Whatever the case, this was really the starting of that crumbling, with the IC championship being taken off Diesel because of that super kick. Now, the next contest that we had was Tatanka taking on Lex Luger. Now, the match nothing to talk about. It's the story that that's to talk about. $1 Million Man and his involvement. Now, one thing to remember is Lex Luger, he was practically done with fans. I don't care what kind of spin WWE would want to put on it with the fans as far as trying to be the number one guy. He was practically done. Way too over the fans were with Bret Hart. So practically done with Lex Luger. So they're doing this thing with the $1 Million Man, and $1 Million Man was going into Lex's room about money and things of that nature, and coming on the King's Court and coming on the Heartbreak Hotel and all different types of stuff. So the thing was, would Lex Luger join the $1 Million Corporation? Did Lex sell out? Well, the opinion poll was the majority of them said yes, as far as the people who voted. The match, Tatanka versus Lex Luger, match sucked. Not even going over it. $1 Million Man comes out, distracts Lex Luger, a roll-up, 1, 2, 3. $1 Million Man comes in, Lex Luger kicks the bag of money out of $1 Million Man's hand, and Tatanka goes to work on Lex Luger. Continuously chops and chops and chops, Samoa drop, and then comes back in and does some more chops, and then takes the dollar bill, the signature, and stuffs it down into his gullet, like $1 Million Man always has. But so far, it has been the $1 Million Man's night, the $1 Million Man's corporation's night. And he fooled everybody. So he says. Mabel versus Double J Jeff Jarrett. Really? Really? You had us watch this. You put this on the card. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Double J wins. Owen Hart versus Bret Hart. Now, this was an instant classic. Now, going back and rewatching this, because all these reviews that I'm doing, I watched them as a kid. But going back and watching them again, I look at things in a different perspective. Now, Owen Hart and Bret Hart and their steel cage match. When you think of match quality, no question this should have been on last, not second to last. When you think about what The Undertaker versus The Undertaker and their entrance and the story behind that as well, about The Undertaker's return and everything, you understand why that was on last. But from Survivor Series and Owen Hart being upset because of his brother Owen, not Bret Hart, excuse me. Because of Owen Hart being upset because of Bret, and then the Royal Rumble turning his back on Bret again, and it broils up until WrestleMania 10, where Owen Hart defeats Bret Hart. Nobody thought that was going to happen. Nobody thought that was going to happen. And Bret Hart really just did not want that to happen. He didn't want to wrestle his brother. Ended up accepting the matchup. That was a great story. And all of this broiled to this matchup because Jim the Anvil Neidhart got involved and helped Owen Hart become the king of the ring, helped Bret Hart retain his championship at the King of the Ring that year. It was a great story. Come to the steel cage match, they put on an instant classic, a knockdown, drag out affair. Next thing we know, Bret Hart's victorious. Owen Hart gets his foot tangled up, upside down, hanging upside down in the cage, and Bret Hart is able to drop to the floor to pick up the victory. Back when you actually had to go over the top and onto the floor or get outside the door, not pin 1, 2, 3. There was no pinfalls back in those days. Now, when you think about what happened after that, the Anvil getting involved and them locking the door and beating Bret down, and then British Bulldog jumping over the railing and all his brothers jumping over the railing and everything, and them getting in the ring, it made for a great story. The Hart family in 93 and 94 made for a huge epic story. And this really carried on to Survivor Series 1994 when Bob Backlund took on Bret Hart for the WWF Championship, in which Owen Hart was in the corner of Bob Backlund in that submission matchup. And the British Bulldog was in the corner of Bret Hart. So it all led up to that kind of stuff too. Good matchup, good story in this SummerSlam. So when you think about that, and now that we're older, it kind of questions a little bit why this wasn't the main event. But then once you see that the Undertaker and him being in the casket at the Royal Rumble, and he vowed never to rest in peace, and the $1 Million Man says that he's bringing back the Undertaker and all his money, and he found the Undertaker, and Paul Bearer calls him a liar, and the Undertaker chokes Paul Bearer, and the lights go out, and he's on the outside, and we hear from the Undertaker, and he's going to bury Ted DiBiase's Undertaker, and all the story. And the question is, what is the Phenom of the WWE going to look like? Are we actually going to see The Undertaker at SummerSlam? Will Paul Bearer actually have somebody? It makes sense that The Undertaker versus The Undertaker was on last, when you think of it that way. But match quality and overall long-term storyline, it does to a point question why Bret Hart and Owen Hart in their steel cage match, why they weren't on last. But I get why Undertaker versus The Undertaker was the final piece to SummerSlam 1994, in which Paul Bearer's Undertaker versus Ted DiBiase's Undertaker was the final closing chapter, and Paul Bearer's Undertaker was victorious. And really what was a nothing matchup, because it was there to just bring back Paul Bearer's Undertaker, and the entrance really was the spotlight. And, of course, the case was closed. Leslie Nelson closed the case. And this is your SummerSlam 1994 review. I hope you enjoyed it. For the most part, they made this SummerSlam for the final two matches, as you can pretty much see. And I hope you enjoyed it. Tune in Sunday for my review of Extreme Rules. It would be much appreciated if you do. And, of course, subscribe and everything else I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast. And until I see you again, this is Webby, and I will catch you on the other side. Talk to you later.